We're going to give ourselves a couple minutes to have everybody log in. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time. Watching that number count go up. I have an amazing group with me. All of my wonderful counselors are here. All right, we're watching that number steady out a little bit, and I think we can officially start now. Amazing. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Tammy Strauss. I am the principal of Newton South High School. Thank you so much for being here. I can imagine all of the feelings that you have right now because somehow your kid's a senior. How did that even happen? I have a 2-year-old and I don't know how she's 2 already. So again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. We have a lot of valuable information to give you here, but so I want you to know that this meeting is being recorded and Jason will make sure to post it. In addition, there are going to be so many questions that come up. As those questions come up, feel free to throw them in the Q&A section. One of my fantastic counselors who's on this call will go through the questions with you, and if it makes sense to answer live, that we will do that as well. So again, Tammy Strauss, principal of Newton South. I'm only here to say hello. I'm going to pass it to my vice principal, Jason Williams.
Hi, everybody. Jason Williams, Vice Principal. Nice to see you all virtually. And congrats on your student getting to their senior year. As Tammy said, it's a impressive, incredible achievement. And you want to definitely savor these last moments they have in high school. But also, it's awesome that they're almost at the end of that road. As Tammy was also saying, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks into the school year to be with us. We have a great team here who will take good care of you this evening. And with that, I will say no more and hide in the background and handle the Zoom. And I'm going to hand it over to the PTSO.
Hey, Newton South senior families. Thanks for coming tonight. I just wanted to say a couple quick things about senior year for your seniors. We at the PTSO try every year to make the year that we're in the best year. And so we're working behind the scenes to just make this a great year for your seniors. We know Barbara Talbatia and I are your co-presidents this year. We know how difficult senior year can be. Barbara's graduated 2 from South. I've graduated 1. We've been in your seats. So rest assured, you're not going to hear a lot from us until spring. But please do pay your PTSO dues. It's through your generosity that we fund all the things we do at South. So thank you for helping us make this a great year for your seniors. In the spring, you're going to start hearing from us again, because as we get closer to graduation, that's when the PTO picks up its planning and we do the celebrations for your senior. So we are going to run South Fest, which is the after prom party for the entire senior class that happens at South. That's a really fun time that almost every single senior will come to. We do the senior send-off lunch. We have a fundraiser where we sell yard signs. We sold a ton of those last year. So when you start hearing from us again in March, when you come up for air, just read our emails. And in the meantime, good luck. And we hope it's a great year.
Great, thank you.
Or I'm supposed to pass it off to Dan. Off to Dan Rubens.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to start sharing my screen here and get you into our slideshow. So please, my apologies, but bear with me. All right. So, you know, there's a number of things that we're going to hear tonight. We're going to share a lot of nuts and bolts information about how are we going to work in partnership to help guide your children, your students, our students from where they are today to where they'll be. This is always a time of reflection. As Tammy said, you know, you may be wondering, how in the heck do I have a senior in high school? Yeah, I was wondering some of the same questions as I was starting to think about some meaningful numbers this year. This year is my 10th year at Newton South. It's my 25th year as a school counselor. And as I was thinking about our remarks for tonight, I was thinking about how so much has changed and yet so little has changed. There were just a few things I thought about. Thought about the fact that in the year 2000, when I first started working in schools, and actually I was working here at Newton South, the hot new phone was a Motorola Razr. There was, a drought of Boston sports championships from 1986 through to 2000 that was so desperate that we celebrated Ray Bourque winning a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. And, if you wanted to know about a pandemic, you had to go to the library and look up in an encyclopedia, what information you could find about, the flu, the Spanish flu and the plague. And the world has changed quite a bit. Yet on the college landscape, some of the things that we were hearing and seeing back then, even 25 years ago, were articles with headlines like, "This year is the most selective year ever." The students and the concern that they're feeling for their future is like no other generation that's felt it before. And it's amazing to me how some of those headlines don't change, even though the world around us has changed dramatically. And what that got me thinking about is really fundamentally how what's going on for our students developmentally as they travel through this final year of, for most of them, their secondary pathway. They're figuring out what comes next. They're figuring out how do they live a life that aligns with the values that they've been developing, that have been emerging in their lives. That is their developmental task, right? And for parents over the years, while the specific, items that might change from year to year, at one point in time, it might have been, oh my goodness, schools are going test optional. What does that mean? At another time, it was the Common App is going electronic. There have been these moments in time that strike people as being fraught with anxiety. But really, it's the process itself that's fraught with anxiety, right? It's the realization that the planning for life beyond high school necessarily includes an element of separation. And there's some sadness that comes with that. Some of the questions that you might be thinking about are, how ready is your 17-year-old to be emotionally and physically and, God willing, someday financially independent? In other words, how confident are you that they've had enough experiences with productive struggle to really feel the sense of agency that it takes to look at our lives at 17 and 18 as a foundation and a starting point, and not an evaluation of who we are as people? So we're excited to be engaging in this process with your kids. You're going to hear a lot about the details from the other counselors. I am keeping this message sort of a little bit more developmental right now, but some of the topics that you'll hear about tonight include really all of these items that you see on this slide in front of us. We're very thankful for those of you who are joining us live, taking this time out of your evening. This will be recorded. Slides will be shared, so don't feel the need to take any notes or be jotting everything down. We're going to go over some of the websites that students will be encountering. We're going to be going over the handouts that we provide for them. So please, at any point in time, ask questions in the chat if things are coming up in real time, but please know that all of this information will be accessible to you moving forward. So as I was saying before, this is a process that is, it's developmental, and it's all young people in all cultures go through a moment in time where they're sort of making a clear transition from, sort of their adolescent life into young adult life. And there's, as I said, some separation involved, but there's also this element of choice, and hopefully for your kids, looking at this as an opportunity to really lean into some of those questions that they've been asking themselves during their high school years. And for you as the adults who come with them and who care so deeply, remembering to celebrate all of those, just successes that your child has had, and to know that in this process, they're going to be looking to you for emotional support. They're going to be looking to you at times for some maybe clerical support, but just understand that it's expected that every family goes through sort of a range of their own feelings, emotions, and tensions as they're figuring out this process. And we are here to partner with you and to make sure that, you know, as your child is going through their planning process, as you are understanding the best ways that you can support them, that you're tapping into the expertise that your school counselors bring. So, you know, developmental processes mean that students are all over the map. Some students are prepared to start applying to college or other opportunities that they might be thinking about, gap year programs, other things right away. Other students may be saying, I'm a little scared to start thinking too deeply about this right now. Wherever a student is in this process, that is okay. And the next best step for them is connecting with their counselor. But tonight's presentation, I just want to acknowledge, we do talk quite a bit about college and college applications. That is something that is a function of, you know, it is where the largest majority of our students go, but every year we are having students who are experiencing a lot of other post-secondary pathways, and you'll hear about some of those, but I also just want to make a pitch that a lot of that planning happens on a much more individualized basis. And if you and your student are considering options and just aren't sure sort of where to go, your child's counselor is actually always the best starting point, no matter what options they're considering for their time after high school. So counselors can serve as that facilitator and sounding board. And we're going to talk about all of those details, the roles that we play, the roles that you can play, and the roles that your students will play. One last just final message and thought is that parenthood is really like a lot of our relationships where they go through cycles, and you know, you might be feeling frustrated at times with your child. You might be feeling angry at times with your child. You might be feeling like, I wish that they were feeling the same urgency about this particular thing that I'm feeling. All of those feelings are normal, right? Sometimes they lead to periods of tension. The most important thing to keep in mind is that relationships all go through periods of connection, periods of disconnection, and then periods of reconnection. And actually the growth and learning that we do on a neurological level is all taking place during that period of reconnection. So if this is something that has already been a process that has maybe brought some stress, you know, to your relationship with your student, you know, this is as good a time as any to think about, how do I use this process to reconnect? How do I listen to, you know, my child's vision, even in the areas where it might diverge some from my vision? And how do I make this process one that leads to a deepening of our parent-child relationship, parent, you know, student caregiver-child relationship, and also, you know, how do I make this an enjoyable experience? How do I make this something that we all learn, grow, and move forward from? It all works out. So when you're having one of those moments, take some deep breaths. Please reach out to us by email, by phone. We are here to help you. So something that we were feeling a little bit anxious about this year was last year we had our long-term college and career center counselor, Kathy Sabet, retire. And this year we've been fortunate, like so lucky to welcome Danny Hoffman, our new college and career counselor. You're going to hear quite a bit from him tonight. And this is kind of a first introduction. Acknowledge that and the great work that Danny's done to already quickly integrate into our South community and our school counseling staff. It was a pleasure to stop into the College and Career Center quite a bit this week and to see the number of students attending college visits and really kind of seeing the space already bustling with a lot of activity. So just wanted to name that as you know, specific welcome to our newest member. And at this point, I'm actually really excited to hand it off to the rest of our extraordinarily talented counseling staff so that you can hear about the real concrete factual information and hopefully have lots of your questions answered. So thank you very much again for joining us. And we look forward to working with you through this process. And I think I'm handing it off to Donna, right?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Donna Siegel, and I'm a Cutler House counselor. Thanks for being here tonight. I want to focus on the next two slides, which are really all about roles and responsibilities in this process. Although we tell the kids that it's their process, they need to drive it. We know they need lots of support, and that support will look different. Dan had already mentioned for different students. You know your kids, you know what they might need. If you think you can help them, that's great. If you think that you won't be able to help them, please reach out to us. We're really happy to work with kids. So let's get to it and look at the roles. The student role, okay? So the student drives the full process. They're supposed to be active, and they're responsible for filling out their applications with help. It's not something that they have to do by themselves. They can get help wherever they can and they feel comfortable. Meeting deadlines, communicating with teachers. Another way of saying that is recommenders. So their teachers, hopefully they've been in touch with, they've made requests to have a couple of teachers write their recommendations. They might also have an outside recommender, which is something we can talk with them about and guide them. Requesting their school transcript is something that they need to do, and they'll do that through My School Bucks. I think someone else is going to talk about that later. Scheduling appointments with their school counselor and Mr. Hoffman. That's a responsibility of theirs. Completing the student information sheet, which we call the senior information sheet, and also helping to nudge you and make sure that the parent caregiver sheet is filled out. Both of those sheets can be filled out, those forms in SCORE. Also, students are responsible for reviewing their transcript, which they will have a chance to see next week when they're uploaded by Dan. I think it's next week. We want them to review their transcript for accuracy. Their transcript encompasses all of the courses that they took, the grades, the credits. We just want to make sure that it's accurate, and kids are the best at really looking at that and letting us know. And they can let us know if there's anything that needs correction. Also, I wanted to mention that it's the students' responsibility to schedule some visits with colleges. Dan just mentioned that there were a lot of colleges that have come in already over the last week, and Mr. Hoffman has many scheduled over the course of the next 3 months. And that list is sent out every week in SCORE. So we're hoping kids are checking SCORE. I think that's about it. The school counselor role is to provide emotional support throughout the process, help in any way possible. We ensure students' lists are balanced, happy to look at a list, making sure that it's balanced and it's appropriate. Mr. Hoffman can do that as well. Sometimes we work together, sometimes we meet together. Provide feedback. We're happy to provide feedback on those lists. Also, we're happy to give feedback on essays if students ask us. And one of the biggest responsibilities that we have is writing a counselor statement for each student. And the information that we've collected anecdotally from students over the years through our interactions, through talking to teachers, through talking to parents, we try to embed and integrate into those statements. We also have the students fill out the senior information sheet and the parent caregiver survey, which is extremely helpful to us. The college and career counselor role, that's Mr. Hoffman. He will provide guidance and strategy around post-secondary planning, and he'll collaborate, like I said, with the school counselor to ensure we're all on the same page. He may meet with students individually, and he also is responsible and will help a lot with resources for financial aid and scholarships, and consult with students and provide any information regarding students who are seeking disability services in higher education. And often counselors do that as well with their students, since they know them and they know the trajectory and how they've gone through high school, what courses they've taken, what kind of services that they've needed and used and benefited from. And the last is the parent caregiver. And the parent caregiver role is just to support the student emotionally and organizationally. For example, helping them to meet deadlines. You could even be helping them fill out their applications. Depending on the student, there'll be varying levels of support. The parent caregiver communicates any limits regarding distance from home, finances. You know your kids best. You know what they're ready for. You know if they've been away before, and if that's comfortable for them. And you also know whether this is a time when they can really take those healthy risks. So hopefully, you'll be talking with them about that. Along with those things, you could participate in any virtual campus visits if you wanted to. And completing the parent caregiver information sheet, which I've mentioned is really important, that can be found in SCORE. and helping students to also complete financial aid forms and any applications. And lastly, if your child will let you, and if it's a healthy interaction, reviewing their essays, if they want to share them with you, but only for grammar and spelling, not for, content, because it really has to be in their voice and it really has to be theirs. And they have to feel good about it, that it's their work. I think that's it. And who am I handing it over to? Who?
It's me.
Okay, I'm handing it over to Shira Limmer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shira Limmer. I'm one of the counselors in Wheeler House. So we're going to talk about some common terms that you might be hearing along the way. One is early decision, and that is a binding contract. Those are often due before December 1st. Often they're even before that. You may apply to only one school, ED1. And then there's early decision 2, which is also a binding contract, but that's due in January. You may only apply to one school, ED2. If you are applying ED or ED2 at any point, students do need to make sure that they invite their caregiver or guardian to join SCORE, because there is a contract that both the student and the parent will need to sign in SCORE. We have to sign it as well, but often we can't do so until the student or the parent do. So that's really important for you all to know. There's also early action, which are early submissions. Sometimes there's restrictive early action, and you have to look at the specific schools that you're looking at applying early action to. They may restrict you to only applying early action to their school, so make sure you look into that. Then there are regular decision schools, usually with January to March deadlines. You get responses early in spring, and then there are rolling admissions. So there's no early deadline. You decide when you're going to apply, and then there's usually about a 6-week turnaround to get those results. Next slide, Dan. Okay. You're going to hear a lot about SCORE, so I'm not going to go into that too much. And then there's test optional and test blind. So test blind. So those are schools that still are not requiring SAT or ACT, the standardized testing. Most schools will still remain optional for this season. There is a full list available that we can share with your students, or you can certainly reach out to your counselor for that list. So check that out. Make sure you have all that information. And I think they're going to talk about it later, but if your student needs any help with deciding whether or not they should submit their scores, they should reach out to either their counselor or Mr. Hoffman will help them through that. And I'm going to pass it off to Kara Veely.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kara Veely. I'm a counselor in Goodwin House. So I'm going to talk about application formats. So the most common is the Common Application. The Common Application is a generic online application that's connected to many, many, many colleges. Most of the colleges here in the US, some in Canada, etc. You fill out, or the student fills out the main part of the application only once. Meaning you don't have to write name, address, parents' names, over and over again. That main part of the application, they just do once, and it's a huge time saver. There are also supplemental sections for many schools where there are essays like, why do you want to apply to our college? And, questions specific to that college or university. It's something that was, came about to save time, and it really is very helpful that way. So another application that we'll mention is the Common Black College application. It allows students to submit a single application for all the participating historically Black college and university members for only $20. If you want to learn more about the HBCUs, come talk to us. And then there are college-specific applications that are straight on, right on the college website. And there are also consortiums that are, applications that are consortium specific. So for instance, California state colleges, there's an application. Colleges in Canada, there's an application. So those are directly through the college or the state's website. So that's an overview. And if you have any more questions about types of applications based on what your student is interested, we are always happy to answer and help. And I'll pass it to Mr. Medeiros.
Hello there, everyone. Good evening. It's Jim Medeiros. I am a counselor in Cutler House for grades 11, 12, Goldrick House for grades 9 and 10. Happy to be here and join you this evening. I'm here to speak of the components of the application. The student compiles each component of the application that is to be sent to the college admissions office. The first is the student application, first and foremost. It's really the most important piece of information that is received by the college admissions office. The application includes personal and family information, a list of courses and grades for all 4 years, their activities, extracurricular activities, school or outside school. It includes their essay, their personal essay, any supplemental essays, their resume, and of course, an application fee. The second most important part of the component of the application process is that students order their transcripts through Newton South High School. And so they do that through My School Bucks, and there's one flat fee, and that covers all the transcripts that are ordered for the year. So the third is the teacher recommendations. We ask that students first secure permission personally from their teachers. Many seniors have done that already in the spring. If your student has not done that, then I think recommend that they speak with their counselor to kind of get some help through the process. The biggest piece right now, after they have secured that permission, is to do a formal request through SCORE, through their SCORE account. And I believe that Ms. Choi later on in the presentation is going to discuss sort of the details of what they must do to request their teacher recommendations. She's going to walk you through that in a little bit. And then the fourth component is the standardized test scores. We do not send test scores, so those are released directly by you from either College Board or ACT, and colleges do prefer an official score report. So that is something that you would do through the College Board website for the SAT and through the ACT website for any ACT scores that students have taken. So our responsibility at the school, the counseling department sends the secondary school report, supporting documents, including the transcript, the counselor statement that each counselor writes on behalf of their students, and also the school profile, which sort of details the all the classes and everything that is important about the school. Colleges look for that profile, including colleges where students have been accepted in the past. So all that is, part of the application. So we wish you well, and always come to us if you need any help at all through the college application process. We're all very happy to help you. And I am honored to pass this along to my colleague, Mr. Aaron Lewis.
Good evening, everybody. Aaron Lewis, Wheeler House Counselor. Tonight, I'm going to touch a little bit more on standardized testing, which was talked about a little bit before. As it says, most colleges remain test optional for 2025. Something has been going on for a few years now. Consult with us, your counselor, or Mr. Hoffman regarding that testing guidance. You might want to be strategic about that. With the SATs through College Board, so you can get all the information on the College Board website for SAT, for registration scores and reports. ACT.org is the ACT website for registration scores and reports. For APs, you self-report those You don't have to send formal scores. You can talk to Mr. Hoffman, you can talk to us about which scores to send. And fee waivers are available for SAT and ACT to speak to us, the counselor. I should mention also that Tanya Londino is our new AP coordinator. Students know her through the Family Consumer Science and WISE program. So she's a familiar face around the school. Now I'm going to move on to Ari Kenyon.
Hi, everyone. Ari Kenyon, Cutler and Goodwin House Counselor. I'm going to talk a little bit more about SCORE, which is a word we're hearing a lot about. But essentially, SCORE is the new web-based college and career resource that we're using. We started using it last year. And it's really like right now in the process, it serves various functions, but right now it's going to continue to be a resource for students as they're building their college lists. It's very user-friendly if you're wanting to look at colleges and get highlights and important information about schools. And then secondly, it's going to be the hub through which we're sending all of our school documents. So transcripts, school profile, teacher recommendations, counselor statement, etc. And thirdly, another important function right now is it's where students can see which colleges are visiting Newton South. And we really encourage students to attend those college rep visits. Great opportunity to connect with a rep and learn more about a school. So over the next couple slides, we're going to talk about some SCORE specific tasks that the student needs to do. So the first one I'm going to talk about is on the student's profile page. So they're going to go to their view profile, and a couple things they want to make sure are done is one, that their primary email is their personal email. Their Newton South email blocks a lot of outside emails, but we want to make sure students are able to communicate with colleges, get those emails. So it's really important that a student changes their primary email to their personal email. Also, this is on the page where students are going to invite their parent or caregiver. Many students have done this, but if your child hasn't, ask them to do that. It's a pretty simple process. They're just going to hit invite parent, caregiver, add your email. And lastly, if your student's applying through the Common App, they are going to want to add their Common App ID to this page. Yeah, so again, we're going to talk more about more SCORE specific tasks over the next slide. So I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Choi.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hye Kyung Choi, and I'm a counselor in Wheeler and Goldrick houses. And I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the SCORE part of teacher recommendations. Most of the students have at this point asked a couple of their teachers to write recommendations. And if they haven't done so, you know, we would be happy to help them to ask their teachers, and they should do that as soon as possible, whether they're applying to colleges that are early or late. Next slide, please. So in SCORE, when students go to My Colleges and then application documents, they get a little prompt to make a new request. That's where they would add their teacher recommenders. They do that 2 times for each of the 2 teachers. Next slide. And in order for us to be able to sync our SCORE system with the Common Application, students are also going to go to their Common Application account and invite recommenders there. They're going to invite their counselor and their teachers, but not add our email addresses so that it does not get sent to us from Common App, but we will be using SCORE to deliver our recommendation letters. Students can invite other recommenders, such as coaches or employers, through Common Application. And for that purpose, students would add the other recommender's email address. And now I'll pass it over to Dave, who will give us a few more SCORE things.
Thank you so much. Hey, good evening, everyone. Dave Kershaw. I am a counselor in Goodwin House, and I'm going to chat with you a little bit about kind of where you're going to be doing a lot of work. Students are going to be doing a lot of work in SCORE as they add schools. So essentially, when you're you put your list together, you've done your tours, you put your list together, you know, and are prepared to request transcripts from South and send materials to schools, you're going to primarily be working in the My Colleges tab on SCORE, and that's what this is going to bring you to. And this is essentially a list of, and you'll find SCORE hopefully as you're working through it and kind of, you know, playing around, getting familiar with it. It sort of has an app-based feel to it, and that's what we've loved about it. It's sort of, I feel it's really user-friendly and pretty self-explanatory if you're clicking through the pages. But one of the ways they do that is in the My Colleges tab located at the top of your SCORE homepage. You can create a list or column of colleges that you're exploring. So you can start, as you may have already done this, or students may have already done this as they're looking at schools. You know, that could be, you know, 30 schools in the beginning. And the beauty of that is as you whittle them down through discussions or through, you know, visits and things like that, you can slide them over. Once you decide that you're going to apply, you can slide them over to the applying column. When you've decided what colleges you're either applying to or have already applied, you need to drag and drop the colleges into the applying or applied to columns, or use the 3-dot icon at the right of the colleges to complete these changes. So there's 3 dots, again, just like on a phone, you click on the 3 dots and it'll expand a menu as to what you're looking to do. So you can slide it over to the column of applying and applied. The key component to that is making sure that you're obviously tracking that information as you're, you know, firstly requesting transcripts from us in Schoolbox. You pay that one-time fee. That's going to obviously give you, give us the sort of indicator that you're applying to schools, and then you're going to start working in SCORE to tell us that you've applied or planning to apply and then have applied. If you move colleges to applying or applied, the key to there is you want to make sure that you have requested your transcripts to be released via My Schoolbox. So, you know, make sure that that's the first component. And then as you're applying, obviously we're going to see that you're ready to send to those schools that you've slid to the applying and then applied column. And obviously the important component of that is applying is you're working on the application. And when you've applied, that means you literally have sent the application off on your end. You've sent all your materials in, and the materials from us are ready to go. That's the indicator there. And the other piece is formally make sure that before you've done that, you've formally requested teacher recommendations from 2 teachers. That's as Mr. Madero spoke about, after having a verbal okay from them prior, you're going to request them in SCORE. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further on as well. So next slide, Dan. So next, in terms of the My Schoolbox piece, it is
Dave, I think you muted yourself.
I apologize. The next slide is is essentially the My Schoolbox is how to navigate to My Schoolbox. Essentially, that's a website that we've used to collect fees from the Newton South End. You're probably familiar with it from the school lunch aspect. And so this is just a one-time opportunity for you to go pay the $20 one-time fee to let us know that you are applying to schools as a high school senior at South. And then that will indicate that, you know, from there, everything can work through SCORE, and that you've already paid and you're ready to request transcripts. And that can be as many as you'd like. So it's a one-time fee. And from there, next we are heading. What's that?
That's me.
Perfect. Next up, Danny. Thank you, Danny, and thank you for the mute catch. I hit that while I was sliding.
Well, you love Zoom. Hi, everybody. Danny Hoffman, college and career counselor. Super excited to be here. Saw some questions earlier. And how do I find out what colleges are coming to South? I will try to send every single week an update which schools are coming this week on Parent Square and via email to students. The other great way to do that is through SCORE. So on SCORE, on your student's dashboard, you scroll down from home on the right-hand side until you see register for office hours and visits, right? And then you will see the list of schools, the most schools that are coming up usually in the next day or two. One thing we really want to highlight is please, please, please talk to teachers at least a day in advance to let them know that you need to miss school. You missed, not school, to miss your class, right? We do have a form. It is in every single school counselor's office. I have a bunch in the College and Career Center, and they're PDF versions. So lots of ways to get access to that and get that signed beforehand so we can make sure that students get excused for college visits. And then once you scroll down and you click see all, you'll be able to also see the full list of schools. So on the next slide, we'll see what that looks like. One of the things I really appreciate about this is you can filter by all of the upcoming visits, or as you add visits to my colleges tab, you can filter so that you're just seeing the schools that you're interested in. And then it'll also allow you to filter for the visits that you register on. So it's a really good way for you to kind of keep track of which schools are coming up when you need to get a pass. Something kind of along those lines is we have of our 120 visits registered. So please just be mindful of which classes you're missing. If there's a school that's local that you know you're going to be able to go visit later, maybe make some thoughtful decisions about which colleges you come down to visit to meet with, if you're able to do some of those visits on your own. I do want to highlight a couple of other really cool resources that are available on SCORE. As you're navigating, you can discover different colleges. All the colleges will post a variety of different events that they're hosting. So online, they have countless events that are happening, and you can kind of navigate to that through the Discover tab in the events. Here's a great one from Reed College talking about is early decision right for me. So SCORE is really going to be your #1 tool for doing research about which schools that are coming up, events that are happening, and ways for you to kind of really learn more and help hopefully winnow down our list from the multiple thousands of colleges that exist to 8 to 12 colleges that we'll apply to. So that's the core component of SCORE. I do want to highlight we have a nuts and bolts document. It's called the Class of 2025 College Application Instructions and Procedures. It's got a lot of text. It's got some screenshots. If you get stuck at any point, I encourage you to go back, just double check that. I've tried to create some bullet points where you can kind of jump around if you're looking for specific guides. We're not going to go over it here. We are going to email it out. I've attached it to a reminder that's going out tomorrow that will include upcoming college visits, as well as this kind of the step-by-step process for everything we've gone over today. So that's all for me. I'm going to pass it off to...
I think it's me.
There we go, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Sarah Stile, counselor in Goodwin House. I know we've gone through a lot, but just to kind of recap on the student responsibilities, which obviously, counselors are here for students to check in and confirm their understanding about certain steps. I think all of us have already been doing that. It's been great to see seniors coming in. So, right here we have, they need to complete their personal information profile and SCORE. There is a senior information survey available in SCORE. And so that's a critical piece for the counselors to finalize their letters of recommendation, their counselor statements that go to colleges. That's under the surveys section. There is also some coordination around the parent caregiver information survey that does require the parent to be invited to SCORE. And then there's a survey in their profile. And that's really, really helpful as counselors complete their statements prior to deadlines. And then also, checking in with a school counselor for having a formal appointment coming. I know Mr. Hoffman might join those meetings as well. We'd love to meet all together. It's really a great opportunity to collaborate and bounce ideas off when building a list and thinking about the process and college essays and all the different components. And so we're happy to partner with you and your student. Requesting transcripts through My School Box is a huge step. And because it uses a slightly different platform, occasionally students might forget about that component, but it's so essential and there are deadlines. So especially if a student is applying early decision or early action with a November or a December deadline, those are coming up soon. So I was meeting with a student yesterday who was pretty sure they're going to apply early, and they were surprised to hear October 4th was when they really needed to let us know. So those deadlines are something to take a peek at to see if they apply to you and your process. And then request teacher recommendations on SCORE. I think students there's a huge range. Some have done this and some it's still going to be coming up for them. And some students might not do it right away if they're not applying early, if they're more on a regular decision timeline. And so there's a huge range there, but once again, students should check in with their counselor. Some colleges do, point number 7 is important. Some colleges do require that students add all high school courses and grades into the Common App or a separate platform. So just be mindful of what specific colleges are requesting, because sometimes that does come into play. And a student should have an unofficial, accurate, updated transcript to look at when completing that. And then finally, sending standardized test scores is another step that students should take on, whether it's through ACT or through College Board if they're sending SAT scores. And again, students, especially in test optional land, now really do want to check in with Mr. Hoffman or their counselor about when they want to submit scores and which scores and what that process looks like. So we're available for that as well. Then I think I have one more slide. So this just sort of is a screenshot of where the surveys live. I mentioned this earlier that, you know, students should complete that class of 2025 senior information sheet under the Me surveys. And so that's a really important step before counselors can finalize their statements. It's just a really great opportunity to make sure that we have everything that we want to put in the statement from the senior. And it's a great way for seniors to communicate things that are on their mind as they think about what their counselor is going to say about them and their transcript and their journey itself. So really, really appreciate that. And there are some student questionnaires that sometimes students use when teachers are looking for some more information prior to finalizing their recommendation letters. So those are a resource as well. And I think that's it. And I think I'm kicking it to Chris Hardiman, I believe.
You are correct. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Chris Hardiman. My seniors are in Goldrick House. So just information on this slide that students always ask about. I already had a student in my office just a few days ago asking for some of this data. And again, we will share this with your students. If some counselors have already started their seminars. I have one seminar tomorrow. So this will be shared with them as well. But this is information that the students need for their Common App. The date of entry, when they started at Newton South, most students did start as ninth graders, but we have transfer students that certainly did not start right in ninth grade. So they should enter the month and year that they came to South. The graduation date, always in June. So that's self-explanatory there. Graduating class size, they're going to need that. We do not rank. Students are always, sometimes confused about that, saying, what is my rank? So Newton South is never ranked as long as I've known, and we still don't. So they can just put none. Our GPA scale is a 4.0 for reporting purposes, and the cumulative GPA is they can find on their transcript. That's going to be in Aspen and also in SCORE. And then the GPA weighting, that's unweighted. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of a summary of this section here of things that we already talked about. The transcript request deadlines are really important. And that's something we really hammered to students, that especially applying early, more and more students apply early. So the sooner that we know if a student has a October 15th or November 1st deadline, the better, because we do take care to write these letters. It's really important that students always check the school admission website, because every year there may be new information that a college puts out, and SCORE does, I think, a really good job of updating that information every year. But just to triple check, it's always good to check the website of the college. The college application instructions procedures, again, someone had asked about that in the Q&A, step-by-step instructions. That is a step-by-step. And for students that really need it broken down, it's all going to be right there. I just mentioned the senior seminars that will be happening. We will have some seminars as well in November for students who are not ready to apply until later deadlines like January. And that's a nice thing we added for students that just feel a little too overwhelmed right now. And then a final reminder for me is just reach out to us as the counseling team and or Mr. Hoffman for meetings or just questions. And you can email us, Schoology message, what have you. So without that, I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, Christina Brown.
Thanks, Mr. Hardiman. My name is Christina Brown. I'm a counselor in the Goldrick House. So I'm going to talk about financial aid. So something really important to think about when applying to college, obviously, is how much it costs, and it costs a lot. So there's a lot of different resources that are available and a lot of ways to kind of access information. So please come back to this slide. There are a lot of great links that Mr. Hoffman set up, linking to different various resources. So MIFA, that's the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. They run a lot of different webinars and give really good information. So if you click on that link, Financial Aid 101, you'll get to a website that has different webinars that are happening, every couple of weeks. So check that out. The CSS profile is, it opens very soon. It's an online application that colleges and some scholarships use to award non-federal institutional aid. So some schools may be asking that you complete that CSS profile. So take a look at that. The FAFSA opening December 1st, hopefully. That sounds right. That sounds great. But you can go ahead and create your FSA ID now and check that out and kind of get a little more information. Plenty of resources. Mr. Hoffman is available. He's amazing. So please don't hesitate to reach out. He's got a lot of resources for all of us. And then some other links on there as well. College Aid Pro, College Ease, and then we'll be having some career exploration workshops here at South. So definitely talk to your counselors, talk to Mr. Hoffman. And I see people have been entering things into the Q&A. Please continue to do that, and I'll pass it back to Dan Rubin.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. This is a moment in our evening where I know questions have been sort of raised and some addressed throughout, but certainly we can address some additional questions. So at this time, I'm actually going to stop screen sharing, but if folks want to drop any additional questions that they have into the Q&A, we're happy to answer some of those live. And I'm seeing, when is the best time to submit the FAFSA? I don't know. Do any of the counselors want to jump in with that one? Or I'm happy to.
I would say once they've released it, I might give it like a week. As long as you submit it really sometime in December, or within a week or two of whenever it's released, you'll get your financial aid in plenty of time. I'm knocking on wood. It's a new system. It is a much simpler system. They've done a lot of really great work to make it much easier to navigate. I was in the system earlier today working on it, and so I think it's going to be a really smooth rollout. So as soon as you have your, this is a good time of year to start, going back and gathering old tax documents, right? Because you may need some of that information, Social Security cards, things like that. So you can prepare for it, create an FSA ID if you need it. You'll need one for the student and one for a parent, guardian, family member.
Excellent. And the other sort of shortest version of that answer, when is the best time to submit? As Danny said, certainly, soon after it's released. But the other piece is just very much being mindful of deadlines. Lots of schools will have priority financial aid deadlines and sometimes very hard and fast deadlines. So just do your best to track along with your student all of those school-specific deadlines. And just be aware that sometimes that FAFSA deadline or financial aid application deadline is not the same as the admissions deadline.
I just wanted to add that although the FAFSA will not be available until about December, many of the private schools will require that CSS profile, which is available for you to fill out starting in October. And I think the deadlines for the CSS profile for the private colleges and universities may be different from their FAFSA deadline. So that is something to take into consideration. I also saw another question about whether or not parents had to have multiple FSA IDs for different children, and no, parents just need one FSA ID, but each child who is applying for financial aid would need their own separate FSA ID.
Great, thank you. Another question I see here is about finding the step-by-step guide. It's asking, is there a link to that in SCORE? So that guide, there is a link to it in the presentation that will be sent out in a PDF format. We will also have that link available live. One of the reasons that we don't yet have it available as a live link is just we didn't want students getting too far ahead of their counselors in this process. So as we roll out our student seminars in the next week, all students will receive copies of that, and that will be available. We're not hiding anything. But thank you for that question. And we will put that link, we'll make it prominently available. Seeing a couple of other questions. What email should be used to request the transcript and school through My School Box, school Gmail or personal email? That is typically something that's submitted through a parent or guardian caregiver My School Bucks account. Some students do have their own My School Bucks accounts, but generally that is something where it's a parent or guardian account, and you'd want to go in through My School Bucks with that. When you're in My School Bucks, it will ask you if you have not already attached your student to your account. It will prompt you to do that using either their name and date of birth or their student ID. But you'll select your current senior when you go to release those transcripts.
Dan, it is perfectly okay though for a student to open their own account and add themselves.
Yep.
I had marked the next one because I think I may have muted during my instructions on that one, but it's asked, you need to list all your schools for transcript request in My School Bucks. You actually do not, and for some parents who have had children who have gone through the process before, you used to have to request for individual schools. We've really streamlined that process through the My School Bucks site, where you only pay the $20 fee just one time to just say that you are releasing transcripts in general, that you're giving us permission to send transcripts on your behalf, and the rest happens within SCORE. So you're not having to request for individual schools. As you add those schools to SCORE, and as I said, slide to the interested in applying and applied tabs, that's how we know to send to those schools. So once you send it's in the applied column that we're sending materials on your behalf to those schools. So just a one-time, the $20 fee in My School Bucks, and you're all done. Does not need to be school specific.
Thanks, Mr. Kershaw. So that actually a companion question to that. I see, are students able to add colleges in the applying column in SCORE after requesting transcripts on My School Bucks? Will they still be able to receive transcripts for those added colleges? So yes, that release process is a one-time release, giving permission to the school to share transcripts, student records with any schools that the student sets to the applying or applied category in their SCORE account. So we just ask that once they've officially submitted the application, they move it from applying to applied. But by shifting initially their applications to their applying column, that is how they let us know that they've added those schools to their list. But that should also be accompanied by a communication with their recommenders and with their school counselor that, you know, hey, I added these 3 schools to my college list in SCORE because I submitted the applications or because I'm preparing those applications. Let's see, we've got
I've got one here. When a college rep comes to South to visit with students, do they get a list of names of the students who registered for the visit? And yes, they do. In fact, most of the time, if they register, reps will also reach out in advance to let them know, to remind them. SCORE also sends a reminder, I think the day before, hey, you signed up for Dartmouth, they're coming at this time. Please come on down. I'm trying to send out reminders. I'm trying not to inundate folks with too many emails, but the colleges do get to see who registers, and it's a great opportunity to kind of follow up with any schools that you maybe have more questions about.
Thank you. There's a question here just about fee waivers for colleges and for standardized testing. Please, if you know your family has questions about fee assistance or eligibility for fee waivers, please you can certainly discreetly communicate with your child's school counselor, and we can facilitate with that process. if you have submitted the fee assistance request through Aspen for this current school year and that has been processed, that actually automatically synchronizes with My School Bucks for the transcript request release fee and any other My School Bucks fees. But the disconnected systems such as college application fees and Mr. Lewis mentioned it before, AP, other standardized test fees, those student can talk to their school counselor. I see a question also with regard to college visits. And it's I'm a little confused with the wording of the question, but it's for early morning college visits, should the student, it says skip class to attend. This one is from 9 to 10. I wouldn't want to use the language of skipping class. If a student is interested in a visit, they should check in advance and bring, as a couple of folks have mentioned, those passes to their teachers. So they should have permission, and ideally they should be checking in with their teacher either when they return with confirmation, that's where I was, remember you signed the pass, or even if it's early morning, maybe checking in with the teacher before dropping their things there and then heading down to the College and Career Center for the visit. We've got time for a handful more here. I'm seeing a question. We've sent out a number of communications about CGN roadmap, and there's a question saying, how does this system fit into the other websites that we're talking about? So that's actually a great question. I will tell you that it's a new product to us, but CGN roadmap is a great resource for those of you that have had a chance to explore it. CGN used to be known as the College Guidance Network. They were an offshoot of sort of the early pandemic, people recognizing that there was a need to share the most current available information from reputable sources on a scalable way. And they created this network of sort of experts contributing to a video library. They host live webinars. And over time, they've evolved that resource into just a wealth of information about all sorts of pathways that students might travel depending on their personal interests. So I sort of see CGN Roadmap as a nice companion to SCORE. It's a great place for students and families to get started, particularly actually parents and families of younger students who are just trying to get the lay of the land and look ahead. CGN Roadmap may feel a little bit less useful at this stage in the process for those of you whose children have a pretty well-formed idea of what they're looking for next. But CGN Roadmap is actually in the process of doing some synchronization on a systems level with SCORE and with ParentSquare. So we are just learning about where they're headed with that. And Newton, as a district that works with all three of those platforms, is actually sort of at the forefront of where all three of these companies are trying to go with making this all more manageable for end users. So I'm sorry, that's probably a little too much information, but just kind of wanted to nerd out there about CGN.
Dan?
Yes.
I think I mentioned the transcript, others mentioned the transcript, and we talked about students reviewing it for accuracy, but maybe it's worth it just to take a minute for you to explain what's not on the transcript the first quarter. I see people are answering that question privately, but I don't know if everybody's seeing it. So that there's an expectation that's clear that first quarter grades will not be on for early.
Yes, so when we send out initial transcripts, they will go out by whatever that student's earliest deadline is, right? So if it's a November 1st deadline, our first quarter has not yet closed. So the first transcript that gets sent out for any students who are applying with rolling early action or early decision deadlines will include their courses from senior year, but it will not have their first term grades. Different colleges, we will always send out those first term grades once they are available. We usually give about 3 or 4 school days from the time report cards are issued for any students with a concern about a grade or an incomplete grade to notify their school counselor, please, hold off on sending my first term grades until this issue is corrected. But once we are about 3 or 4 school days beyond the release of term 1 report cards, we do start sending updated transcripts with those grades on it. When we send those out, colleges will incorporate them into their early action and early decisions if they are able to. It really is up to the college. So we think it's always important to note that, for instance, standardized testing, ACT or SAT, taken after November 1st, and grades received after November 1st are not guaranteed to be taken into consideration as early action and early decision schools are making those decisions. Thank you, Donna, for bringing that up.
There's a question about attendance forms for visiting college visits. Students need to get a pass from their teacher 24 hours in advance, right? We have passes in all of the guidance offices as well as in my office. So students should be doing that. That is a test that they need to take on.
I see a question, do we need to request IEP and school testing information via SCORE? That's a great question. So some of our students may choose to disclose a disability, an educational disability, as part of their application process. This comes up from time to time if a student's special education team has maybe decided that it makes sense for the student to forego studying a world language, and the student is applying to a college that normally would require a world language as part of their admissions criterion. So a student may choose to disclose their disability. Some students choose not to disclose their educational disabilities. That process, though, requesting any copies of IEPs or psychoeducational testing, academic testing, those documents should be requested through the special ed department, not through the same records request process and transcript release process that school transcripts go through. So if your child is considering disclosing their disability during the application process, you should be in communication with their special education liaison, and we can facilitate, along with the liaison, getting those documents shared. We'll try to get to just a couple more questions here. So there's one that I see about applying to different schools or majors. It says, do you need to create multiple Common Apps to handle tailoring to the various majors? So, perhaps at some schools, there is a very specialized major and the student wants to, submit a version of their essay. You do not complete different accounts. You don't create different accounts in the Common App. Once a student submits their application, they can then edit other portions of that application for submission to other schools, additional schools, but it's really a sequential process. You can't edit something once it's been submitted. It gets submitted as like a snapshot in time as a PDF form of the document. So the students just want to be very careful. If they are doing that, I would encourage them to meet with Mr. Hoffman, talk with their counselor, and really kind of make sure that they understand. It's very easy to lose track of, wait, which version of the essay was that? So, students want to be thoughtful before sort of presenting different versions of themselves to different schools. And I'm seeing we'll hit just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. But I'm seeing one here. When does Newton South High School know to send recommendations, profile, transcripts for a particular application? Does the student move the school to applied and then Newton South submits all supporting documents? Great question from a process standpoint. This is something that SCORE, with last year's class, we're working through it for the first time. had some features that our prior platform did differently. So we were going through a learning process. The practice that we would like to see students following is when they figure out that there's a school that is on their list, we want them to move that school to their applying column. And that applying column tells us, we get on our dashboard an alert saying this student has a deadline on this date. And it gives us an indication, in addition to submitting the survey to their counselor, in addition to completing the My School Bucks release, by putting that school in their applying column, it gives us that flashing light that this student has a deadline on this date right there in SCORE. At that point, we may send the documents at any time that they are ready. We'll probably, prior to November 1st, hold off on sending those until we see that the student has marked their application as applied. But once we get to November 1st, and certainly once we get to January 1st, we are typically in the habit of sending any documents that are ready and available to schools as soon as they are ready and available. As you might imagine, in a school with a senior class as large as ours, and students often applying to 5 or 10 schools, or in some cases, potentially even more, we're sending out a lot of applications. So we really try to keep up with the volume as well as we can. But it goes a little bit slower with the student's first application.
I've got a question here. What if you don't want your first quarter grade sent to your early action, early decision schools? That's a good question. I would come talk to us about why. Colleges are going to see your first quarter grades. They're going to see your midterm grades, and your early decision or early action admission continues to be dependent on continued academic performance at a similar level, right? Come talk to us if you're stressed out about things. We're here to support you and help you strategize around navigating this year. That we know you're juggling a lot of different deadlines, a lot of different work, right? So we're here to support you through that. But they're going to see the grades eventually. And so it's, if there's something you're really worried about, come talk to us. We can talk about how you might frame that if there's something you're really worried about.
Great, thank you. And I saw a question earlier, and it might have been responded to in writing, but I'm seeing another sort of related question just about communications. And I saw a question related specifically to Parent Square. So the district has made a strong push to move communication from some of the other platforms that we've used to Parent Square. So I know it is one more platform, but it really, I just want to be clear that it's an effort, an intentional effort from the district to really kind of streamline everything onto that one platform. It is going to be our primary mode of communication as far as sharing out newsletters and lists of colleges that are visiting, links to information, recordings, Mr. Williams's weekly newsletter, everything. So I would strongly encourage all families to turn to Parent Square. In the short period of time that I've been using it, it really does feel like a very effective communication strategy. So thank you for bearing with us on that with one more new platform.
And then Dan, if I can add something, I was coming out of the shadows for a second here. So with Parent Square, it's really important to know, because a common question that I also get as well, and this is really beyond the scope of post-secondary planning and in general, is, can you add me to your mailing list, or can you add me to your communications, list or something like that? And it's important to understand that this isn't really like MailChimp or some other sort of thing where we have a list of emails and we're adding you to it or taking you off of it. It's really much more of a, if all of you on this call have a student who is a senior, so whenever someone sends something to the class of 2025 group, you're going to get that email. There's no adding, there's no opt-in or opt-out or anything of that nature. So if you're getting my weekly newsletters, if you're getting Mr. Hoffman's other communications about college visits and so on and so forth, you're going to continue to get all of those notifications. The one advantage of getting into Parent Square directly is you can change those notification settings. You can potentially get the app if you would rather receive those messages in that way instead. And it gives you the ability to potentially comment through those. It also gives you a ability to get those in your own language through translation and all of those other sorts of things. So Parent Square is, as Dan mentioned, Parent Square is really what we're shifting to, and it really is much more of an automatic sort of service. So if you're getting my weekly updates, you're in already. So it's a matter of just making sure you're just keeping an eye on those messages, but they will go to your emails. One of the biggest things really is if you're okay with the digest, which I believe is the default setting, you can keep it that way. But if you do log into Parent Square and you want messages as soon as we send them, you can change that notification setting to instant as well.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Williams. So I'm gonna try to see if we could hit 2 more final questions, and then we'll wrap it up for the evening. Thank you to everyone for bearing with us so far. I see a question here that I think we can answer pretty quickly. What happens if there are additional applications or a second batch of applications after maybe a first round with early? What if you're not aware of that before the deadline for requesting those transcripts to be sent? What I will say is our deadlines for requesting your transcript in advance of your admissions deadlines are really most important for the first school that you are applying to. Once your counselor recommendation is prepared and your teacher letters of recommendation have been prepared by your teachers, adding additional schools at that point and sending those documents is a much simpler, more streamlined, and more timely process. It's really more mechanical. Getting that first release or notification in ahead of that deadline is really about giving your recommenders sufficient time to make sure that everything is prepared ahead of the deadline. And I think, holy moly, it looks like that's all of the questions that we had at this point, I think have been answered live or in writing. And I can't thank you enough for joining us. If you've watched through this, maybe you're watching on double or triple time, we've come to our close. But thank you. I thank all the counselors for just doing a great job with their presentation, answering questions. And please, at any point in time, don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us. We really mean it when we tell you we are your partners in this journey. We have loved getting to know your children over the last 3+ years and look forward to this final capstone year on their Newton South and Newton Public Schools experience. And welcome your feedback and your input at any time. So thanks so much. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.